Welcome to LFC. It's Sports Time. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Today I have with me Mike Tallon, former Phoebus girls basketball coach. Welcome, Mike.
Welcome.
I've been trying to get you here and finally made it. And first of all, congratulations on your marriage.
Thank you.
Took a while for you to find the right woman, I guess.
Yeah, my parents still haven't adjusted to that yet.
Well, let's talk a little bit because you didn't grow up on the peninsula. You're from North Carolina.
I am. Kannapolis, North Carolina, primarily.
Talk a little bit about growing up there. Did they have rec leagues and all that for sports prior to high school?
We had Little League baseball, Pony League baseball. Then we went to high school. Then it was American Legion. Those were the basics. So your ages weren't broken down into like they are now. 8, 9, 10, and 11. If you were a Little League player, you played with 12-year-olds, and Pony League it was 13 to 15, and then high school, you know, it's basically the same.
Right. Now, growing up in Kannapolis, was this town a big town or a small town? Did you know everybody?
It was a mill town. Cannon Mills was the largest organization there, so it was a town of about 45,000. So it was a small town, but very active, and it was a pretty good place to live. Okay.
Now, once you got to high school, basketball and baseball, that was your two loves?
Played football up until high school, and then I got specialized in a little bit and played basketball and baseball and enjoyed both and had a good time.
All right. Had to have a good time because you became All-American. All-State.
I was an All-State player.
Yeah. I'm going to give you All-American.
Well, I appreciate that, but I wasn't that good, trust me. So, yeah, we had, you know, it was a one-horse town, so whenever we had any games, that was about the only thing anybody had to do, so we had a lot of support in that respect, and that made it kind of fun. And local newspapers got involved, so you couldn't wait, you know, the next day to get up in the paper and see if anybody had anything nice to say about you. So that part of it was pretty fun too.
But this happened as a junior and a senior.
Yeah, it did, and I was really proud of that. My senior year in basketball, I had a backcourt mate, and both of us averaged about 20 a game.
Wow.
That year, and we both made All-State that year, and we were fortunate enough to, in the All-State game, we played against David Thompson. And in fact, to back up a little bit, my high school team, my senior year, we went to the state playoffs, and that was the first team that we ran into was David Thompson's team.
Wow.
And I have the distinction of stealing the ball from him 3 times. And I also have the distinction of having one of the longest distance block shots in the history of North Carolina, I think, too. He took one of my shots, and I think he sent it up 3 decks or something like that during the game. But they beat us pretty handily. They were pretty good.
Well, he could get up in there. There was no doubt about it. Well, then you graduate, and you're recruited. Talk about the recruiting process and where you ended up going.
When I was in high school, recruiting was nothing like it is now. Nobody knew you. So basically everything was by word of mouth. I actually thought I was going to go baseball more than basketball, primarily because of my size. Because in baseball, I had looks from 4 professional organizations all through high school. So at that time, I was thinking, you know, maybe I was going to be a professional baseball player.
Right.
So I ended up going to Pfeiffer, where I could do both, and it was an NAI school, and they were #1 in the country, and we played all the ACC schools, Carolina, Duke, NC State, regularly.
Right.
So that was a neat place to be, and the coach there was off season, he was a scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So a lot of the players that went through his program, even though it was a small college, got drafted. And then I played 1 year of basketball there too. And it was a good experience.
Okay, now I know you played guard. What did you do in baseball? What was your position?
I was an
infielder.
I was a converted shortstop. Coach Farabee thought that I was pretty fast for a white boy, pretty fast. So he made me a center fielder, which I fought every step of the way, but he was right. And it turned out that I enjoyed that position quite a bit.
Okay. Well, then your family moves north. They come to the peninsula. Mm-hmm. And you decided you wanted to play where your family could see you play.
Well, it was more a question of I needed to. My dad and mother needed me back here. So I ended up coming back here, and Coach Farabee got in touch with Bev Vaughn at CNU, and I went and had an interview with those guys over the course of the summer, and then I ended up going to CNU and playing for Bev.
All right. Now, you had a backcourt teammate that you still were pretty close with.
I did. I think we were the only two redheaded combination in small college basketball. So yeah, Doug Baggett.
Doug, and now he's still coaching.
Great coach.
And he's over in York County,
Mm-hmm.
Tab. Okay. Now, when you graduated after your 3 years up at CNU, and evidently you had some good memories from up there.
I did, and it was players like Doug, and we had quite a few local guys that went to Hampton High School, Newport News, in this area. So those friendships. In fact, we had an alumni game a couple of weeks ago. We call it the Legends game because we were so old. So that was pretty fun seeing those guys. But yeah, it's been a good experience being here.
Now you graduated and you were going to become a probation officer.
That was the plan,
But you never got there.
Thank God. Don Musselman got me a call, and Bob Kellen is actually the guy that, and you know Bob very well.
Right. Yes, I do.
Bob was actually the guy that was currently the AD at Phoebus at that time, and he got me an interview with Don. And then Don called me up, and almost the day I was going to work, and said, "Would you like to come work for me?" And so I jumped on it.
There was let me think, probation, teaching, and coaching.
Getting shot at. Yeah, you're right.
That was a no-brainer. But when you went to Phoebus, you coached everything.
I did. It was almost like a blind squirrel trying to find a nut every now and then. So I did, and I just loved athletics, and that's what got me through high school. That's what got me motivated to do everything. And I was fortunate that both my parents, my mother and father, both were very good athletes. And my father went to Western Carolina on a football scholarship, and he was a quarterback. My mother was an all-state basketball player. Way back in the day. So I was always exposed to it, and they were very supportive in everything I did.
Well, everybody knows you as girls basketball coach because that's where you became really known for winning state championships and all that. But when you went there, you coached football. You helped the quarterbacks and all with not only with Smith. Coach Smith was there. Coach Trainham.
Right. And Coach D. Yeah.
And then Coach D showed up. But then you also coach baseball, and you have the distinction of what nobody else has done out of Phoebus.
We did. We had a couple of good years there, and it's a struggle there. Great school, great people there, but the feeder programs aren't what they are at the other schools. So I was fortunate that I had a core group of 5 guys basically, and that were real solid players. 2 really good pitchers. One went to VCU, that's Mark Dunford, and one went to Duke, and that's Doug Davis.
Right.
And those 2 guys carried us quite a bit. And Jeff Beasley was my shortstop, and his daughter just finished at Kickingham. She was their shortstop. Right. So yeah, I'm real proud of that. With those guys were special.
Well, not only that, but you're the only one that's won a district championship with the baseball.
That was just being at the right place at the right time.
Finding that nut you were talking about.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes,
now, coaching the 3 different sports, I mean, you go from one sport to the other sport and no break.
No.
You enjoyed that?
I didn't know any better. So I was fortunate that when I worked with Bill, and Bill asked me to be on his staff at that time, and I told him, I said, really, I don't know how much help I'm going to be with you, but he would let me leave practice, and if you know Bill, this is a big deal.
Right.
He let me leave practice 30 minutes early on the days that I had my basketball workout, so I would go till maybe 4:30, and then I would go in the gym from 5 o'clock to 7:30 with the basketball, so I'd get home at 8:30 most every night, and then when baseball season kicked in, I went from I'd go baseball practice early, and then we'd come back in at 5:30, and we'd practice at 8 o'clock for basketball. So at that time, that's all I knew. I didn't have anything else to do.
Well, that's why you didn't get married. You didn't have any time.
Plus, nobody would have me, so that had a lot to do with it.
But then you took over the girls' basketball program and really turned that around. I mean, let's talk about some of the gals that you had. I mean, and some of them are now in coaching. So.
They are. And I was lucky that I had 2 sisters, and they were both really good athletes when I was in high school. And I would go to watch their games, and nobody show up. Nobody would watch them. And they worked just as hard as we did, but nobody would watch them. And so when I got the opportunity, I had them in the back of my head all the time, and I said, maybe we can make this interesting enough where people will actually come watch us. And for a while there, we had bigger crowds than the boys teams did for a long time.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun.
Talk about some of those athletes.
Well, I started with Lynn Anastasio. Right. She went to Louisiana Tech, and Lynn was with me for 2 years, and I was an assistant with Phil when she got there. And
we're talking about Phil Lee, who was the coach.
Who was the head coach, and went to Christopher Newport, and then went to Vanderbilt, and now I think he's a retired principal in Henderson, North Carolina. But Lynn was an All-American that year, and it was her and basically 5 other sophomores. And we went 20-5 that year, and 4 of the games we lost were when Lynn was hurt. So that tells you, and she's still, to this day, she's the best shooter I've ever seen, to this day. And then there was, I've had so many good ones.
I understand.
I mean, really have.
And you'll probably leave some out, but do the best you can.
And then there was Terry Williams, Boo's younger sister,
right,
who tough as nails and probably one of the best clutch players I ever had. In fact, I think she won 3 games her senior year on last-second shots. Swore to me she'd never go into coaching, ever.
And what you doing now?
Now she's the head coach at Georgetown University, and she's got a top 25 ranked team, so again. And then there was Nikki Reed, who came in right at the end of Terry's career. Nikki was a 5'3" pistol of a point guard who is incredibly competitive. And she became an All-State player, and she became an All-American, as was Terry. And Lynn was an All-American. So there, I'm getting some decent players in.
Right.
And Nikki's now the head coach at Howard University, and Nikki Geckler is her name now. And Lakeisha Frett, who came in after Nikki, and Keisha's now married, and she's even more surprised that I'm married.
Well, when I called and talked to her and mentioned your marriage, there was silence on the other end. She says, "We talking about the same guy?"
Yeah, that's, she's surprised somebody would actually marry me. That's what it was. But talked to her dad in the 8th grade, when she was in the 8th grade, and super family, just super family. And I told him when I met him, and after I'd had one workout with her, I told him, I said, "This is what I believe." I said, "I believe by the time your daughter finishes here, she will be the best player in the country." And she was.
She ended up being Gatorade Player of the Year and all that.
Naismith Player of the Year, Parade All-American Player of the Year. Still holds the record for most points scored in the state of Virginia, male or female. And this was sitting on the bench a quarter and a half almost every game.
Yeah. Okay. And then she went to University of Georgia.
Georgia.
And
funny story about that, that most people don't know. Georgia was the last of her 5. And she had visited her other 4 schools, and she'd already made up her mind. And she was going to go to Virginia. And she comes back after her 4th visit, which was Penn State, and she says, "Coach, I know what I want to do." And I said, "But you still got Georgia on your list." She said, "Coach, I know what I want to do." And I said, "Well, if they were good enough to be on your list, they're good enough to go visit." So she goes to Georgia, and apparently Andy put on a good show for her. So she came back and she said, "I want to go to Georgia." and I said, and this is to this day, and I'll never forget this, I said, "What made you change your mind?" And she said, "He's just as crazy as you are." That's just what she said.
It was like having the same type of coach, and she did well down there.
Yep, she did All-American there too.
And ended up going playing in the WNBA
for about 11 years.
Yeah, and then she went back and is
back to Georgia coaching, and she also said, "I'll never coach ever."
So you had 3 girls, Nikki and Terry and Lakeisha, not going to be a coach, and they're coaching.
And Lynn actually was a coach. A lot of people don't know this.
Well, I didn't know that.
She was an assistant at San Diego State, and then she went into the FBI, and she works with anti-terrorism. So she's prepared.
Well, she came from an athletic family.
Oh,
her brother was with Pat Patrick.
And her father.
And her father was not only a good player, but also a good coach. And then we lose you. You go to Newport News.
Ashby Kilgore's.
Broke my heart.
Ashby Kilgore's fault.
Okay, I'll blame her then.
She got me there, and then she left me.
Yeah, but you went there strictly to be AD, no coaching.
Right.
But that didn't last.
No, it didn't. Our girls program went 0-20 the first year, and And she said, would you take it the next year? So she had to get, because I was the AD, she had to get special permission for me to do that. So I did that as an unpaid coach, doubling as AD, which when Gary Sylvie was there, that was a no-no.
Right.
So I irritated a lot of people that year and the next year, and then finally I just said it's too much. It's too much to put on everyone else, so I'll just go back to coaching, which I know I'm halfway decent at anyway.
Right.
Because the AD job is
it's demanding.
It is very demanding. You're there all the time.
You got to be there all the time. Whenever there's a contest at the school, be it wrestling or volleyball or basketball or whatever, you're there.
Or parents or anybody else that wants to complain, you're always there.
So you end up going back coaching basketball, and then took on softball, which you had not done, to my knowledge, prior to going there.
No. The only fast pitch softball background I had was my father was a good fast pitch player, so I was exposed to that quite a bit. And when I first got here, I was a pretty decent softball player, and they tried to get me to play with Fox Hill, but so I went to a couple of their workouts, but it didn't get me then.
Right.
So I went back to play with the travel team I was playing with. But then Dr. Kilgore again says, we need a softball coach. So I said, I'll do it.
And you became very successful.
So,
I mean, you won district champions. And talk a little bit about that, because now we're talking a different sport, but there's some carryover. I know a lot of people don't understand how much carryover it is from one sport to the other sport.
With baseball, there's a lot of carryover, but it's a completely different game, and particularly pitching. And my first year there, we were fourth in the district, but we ended up being second in the regionals, and we went to the state tournament my first year, which was very unusual. And then the next year, we finished third in the district, and we won the regionals and we won the state tournament. We went 9 straight games and didn't give up a run, and no errors for 9 consecutive games.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun.
If you don't have a pitcher, I don't care if it's baseball,
doesn't matter,
or softball, you're not going to win. I don't care how good your athletes are.
No, you've got to be real solid up the middle, catcher, pitcher, shortstop, center field, and I was.
How did you develop your pitchers? Did you have somebody come in and help you? Because I know Wade Trainham does this.
Wade's great at that. I was lucky that a lot of the pitchers that are my 2 better pitchers, the 2 best pitchers I've had, they had prior training before they got to high school, because if you don't have it before you get to high school, it's too late. So picking it up late these days is, particularly that position, is almost impossible to be very good at it.
Right.
So a lot of the kids that I had already had good mechanics. They had good coaching at a younger age. So, I didn't have to mess them up too much.
Right. Well, and then you didn't have to concentrate on that particular part of the game, but you had more of your philosophy and game situations and what you were expected to do. And then you also became very successful at the basketball program out of Woodside.
We have. After that 0-20 year, the second year, we ended up winning the district 2 years after I took that over. And we were consistently in the top 2 for the next 7 years, and we've always been in the top 3 with the exception of 1 year. Right. And then last year we won the district again and went to the state tournament again last year.
Does this reflect on your coaching ability? You get the good athletes, but you have to also be able to coach the young girls. To me, I don't know. A guy can coach girls. I mean, I coach guys because I can yell at them. But
well, these. I don't know. I've always had that philosophy. They're athletes, and you treat them like athletes. If you start saying you can't do this because you're a girl, of course, then you can't. So trust me, they're different. They'll come in the gym, and if they've had an argument with somebody before they enter the gym, that will stay in their heads maybe till the next day or the next month or even the next year for that matter. But whereas a guy will have an argument with somebody, he'll walk in the gym and it's gone.
Right.
So they don't carry that baggage around with them. But as far as teaching, they're easier to teach because they don't pretend to know it all, and they haven't until now. They haven't had every Tom, Dick, and Harry teaching them what to do, and now it's everybody's a coach. Right. Now these kids have too many coaches, and that's just my opinion. But they get too much individual instruction from too many different people, and they have personal trainers, and they have personal fitness trainers, and they have, I don't know when these kids have fun anymore.
Right.
So I've kind of changed my philosophy to try to make sure that they've got a little bit of a social life,
Right.
as opposed to in the past. No, you need to be focused on what you do.
Right.
Particularly girls, guys. You don't have to tell them they need to play; they'll do it on their own. But girls, if you tell them, they'll do it. But doing it on their own, very few do.
Okay. Talk about your philosophy a little bit, and I go back to what Lakeisha said. He's crazy like you. But talk a little bit, and this is the last one. We want to wrap this thing up, but I want to know, because you've been successful wherever you've gone, whether it was in baseball at Phoebus, basketball at Phoebus, softball, or basketball out at Woodside. You've been very, very successful as a coach. So you must have a way that you impart this knowledge that's up here to the young ladies that you're coaching.
Thanks for saying that, but I really just think somebody upstairs has blessed me personally, and that I've been blessed with good people. But a lot of it's based on discipline and fundamentals. And I don't care what you do, if you're not disciplined and you don't have the fundamentals to build on, you're not going to be very successful anyway.
Right.
And the other part of coaching is motivation. You have to find what buttons you can push and which ones you can't, and then you gotta really make kids believe that what you're doing will work.
Right.
And you have to get them to buy into your system. And then last, you got to know what you're doing.
That always helps.
You really do have to know what you're doing, and a lot of people don't equate. Well, let me rephrase this. They think because they were a good player, they're going to be a good coach.
Yeah.
And I was a good player. For my size, pound for pound, I was as good as there was. But there were people bigger, faster, stronger than I was. So that made me realize that if my fundamentals had been better, had I been taught at a younger age better, then maybe I could have gotten to that next level. So one of my goals, and always has been, is that if I'm going to teach somebody, I'm going to teach them the basics and build on it, and not go from point A to point Z and leave everything in the middle out.
Right.
So before I go to B, I'm going to make sure we got A, and before I go to C, I'm going to make sure we got B. And I don't care how simple it is, and you've heard that old adage, the KISS philosophy,
right.
Keep it simple, stupid. Well, I'm stupid, so I have to keep it simple. But that's basically all I do. There's nothing special.
Appreciate you coming in.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Thanks for tuning in to LSC and Sports Time. I want to thank my special guest, Mike Tallon. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Until next time.